Nobody's a math major, but you can see there's a lot of fluctuation. The denialists say, well, you know, fluctuation's normal. It is, no question. But here's the deal. This is where the carbon dioxide concentration was in 2010, way up there on that red dot. And if we keep going, by 2050, it's going to be up there. Now, again, none of you is a math major, but you can all see that's not a normal aberration. Something's wrong. And actually, if you look at the data, this problem pretty much starts with the Industrial Revolution when we started burning all these fossil fuels. Okay, let's skip on to effects. And again, I have so many illustrations of different effects, but I just had to pick some to show you. I think this is significant. This is the Donald Rumsfeld Department of Defense, and basically what they're saying there is that we don't know if somebody else is going to bomb us like they did in September the 11th. But we do know this problem is happening. We do know that it is destabilizing parts of the world, and we do know we're going to have to deal with it. And that's serious. Okay, this is weather, but when you look at it in a long haul, it's climate. The hottest years on recorded history have been very recent. This is the North Pole in 1980. This is the North Pole in 2007. That's a very serious reduction. It's an unprecedented reduction in known, recorded human history. Maybe it did this a long time ago. We don't think so, but we don't have any records of it. But that's a pretty extreme example. Now, the reason that's significant is that when the sun hits ice on the top of the earth and it bounces off, it doesn't heat the water up very much. But when the sun hits the water that no longer has ice on it in the summer, the water absorbs that heat. And you know that if you go to a swimming pool at the end of a hot summer day, and the air might have cooled off a lot, but if you jump in that water, it's warm, water holds heat. And the problem we're seeing is that now in the fall it takes longer for ice to reform, and when it does reform it's thinner and therefore it melts faster the next year. So if you hear a scientist talk about the feedback loop, that's an example of where it's feeding on itself and it's accelerating. And this is what gives people like scientists heartburn. It's from 1953 to 2010. It's the extent of sea ice that's up there, and the gist of it is it's melting remarkably quickly. Okay, and I didn't want to show you all this either. I want to save time for more interesting stuff. Okay, now it should work fine. We have lost 1/3 of our polar bears, and a half of them are endangered. And of course, they can't help themselves. They can't call us to help. We have to kind of help them. This always works with teenagers. Y'all are too old, maybe, but the teenagers always go, oh, they kind of melt, and then I have their attention. So just in case I kept it, Okay. I want you to know that these pictures are taken at the same time of year. So this is a glacier in Alaska in 1914, and here is the same glacier from the same perspective in 2004, and it's melted. And then this is one in the Italian Alps, and it's gone. And I could look up the years, but it's not that many years. This is Kilimanjaro, which is in Tanzania on the Kenyan border. My sister used to teach in the bush of Kenya. In '88, 2 brothers and I went to go visit her. We went to see Mount Kilimanjaro, and I remember it looking pretty much like that. 1970, 2000, here it is in 2007. The glacier's essentially gone now. Why does that seem to matter? You could argue, who cares? Here's the deal. In Kenya, the #1 source of Western hard currency is tourism. If fewer tourists go to Mount Kilimanjaro, that's less hard currency for their economy, and they're less able to take care of themselves. In college, I took a class in physical geography, and we learned that glaciers always move, and of course they always melt a little bit, but they have rocks embedded on the bottom of them, and they scrape across rocks on the surface of the earth, and you can hear a glacier move. And I thought that was fascinating. So in '85, I went to Europe, went to Switzerland, because that's where my ancestors mainly came from, because I wanted to hear a glacier. As it turns out, we went to Grindelwald, and we stayed in this place called Natur Freundehaus, which means the house for the friends of nature. Seemed like a logical place for a tree hugger like me to stay. Then we hiked up this Grindelwald Glacier. And this is what it looked like in this is the postcard that somebody mailed in 1906, so maybe the postcard was a few years old, but that's what it looked like. We hiked up on this side. That's pretty much how I remember it looking in 1985. So then I went to see An Inconvenient Truth in 2006, and I saw that picture, and that's when I had my expletive deleted moment. That's when I went, this stuff I learned about in school is not something for the next few generations away from us. This is something that's happening right now here today. And this is when I said, all right, this is where I'm going to dedicate my life. Here's another reason why this is so important. Bolivia is considered the poorest country in South America. This is where the glacier, when it melts, that's how they get their water. I've spent a fair amount of my career, I just banged the lavalier, sorry. I spent a fair amount of my career in public health, and I can't tell you how important access to clean water is to basic public health, much less economic development. So this is a very serious thing. Glaciers, I understand why you might think that wasn't important, but when we look at it this way, we realize it is. This is Asia. Indus River, Ganges River, Brahmaputra, Salween, Mekong, Yansky, Yellow River. You've heard of some of those rivers. 40% of the population relies upon these Himalayan glaciers to provide their water. That's serious. We have island nations that are literally being inundated. This is an island nation that has now a line item in their national budget to buy a new country because it's clear they're losing theirs. We didn't do so well relocating half of New Orleans. Can you imagine trying to relocate your whole country? This is a graph of what scientists believe that for every meter that the sea grows, or the sea level increases, this is how many hundreds of millions of people will need to be relocated. Now, it's going to take a long time for it to go up a meter, but you get the point. A lot of very high populated cities are living on very flat land close to the sea. This is a map of the drought in our country this year. I wish it had a key. To me, it's unprofessional to use a map without a key, but this is what I could find. We've never had, normally it's 1 in 8 Americans is in a drought in the summer. And then it became 1 in 4, and now they're saying 2/3, if not 3/4 of Americans are having a drought this year. You folks in Indiana have gotten hit particularly hard. It's going to affect food prices. The fires in Colorado have been very, very serious, and now they're up in Washington State, they're having similar fires. I think that's pretty frightening. How many of you have heard of the problems in Darfur in East Africa? Many people present that as a civil war over religion, and experts say there's an element of that, but usually whenever we say something's over religion, it's not. It's usually religion represents the power struggle. The power struggle is usually over resources, commonly oil in some parts of the world. But here, experts say it's a battle over who has access to water, and Lake Chad is now 10% of the volume it was when I was in elementary school. So people are having to struggle over water. And the consequences are, and I should say, it is the case in most poor countries, really poor countries. The number one reason why girls don't get to go to school is because it's their job to haul water and they have to walk further and further to get the water. In this particular case, their moms have to go too, and they have to oftentimes have armed guards to protect them. That keeps mom from making dinner, and it keeps the kids out of school, and it's disruptive. But the bigger problem, of course, is that their brothers are being conscripted to fight in the Civil War. And so this is a population that's being decimated, and it's partly due to climate change. Nairobi, Kenya, where my sister also taught, was purposely built high up, a higher elevation where the malarial mosquitoes could not overwinter, so they'd get killed off every winter. Now, as the climate has warmed, the malaria mosquitoes can survive all year round in Kenya. My sister has had 2 kinds of malaria. My boyfriend's had it. I've known plenty of Africans who have had it. And they all have told me, with one exception, my boyfriend, who's just tough in my estimation, they all wish they would just go ahead and die. They were so sick, they just wish they would die. It is one of the top 2 killers of little kids. But can you imagine being the mom and feeling the powerlessness that she feels to watch her kid struggle to live if the kid doesn't even die. These are, again, very significant problems that I think I'm sure we can link it to climate change. I have been and stood on this impoundment in Ghana. Louisville has a sister city in northern Ghana. This impoundment, it was a big lake, is what they used to collect water in the rainy season, and they would slowly release it to water their crops. And Ghana was self-sufficient, producing all of its own food, which is a good accomplishment. But then they had a series of torrential rains, and it weakened the dam, and it blew out, and so it disrupted food production for at least a year there. And sometimes people don't recover. It's not like they have farmers insurance like we do. We've had very significant flooding in places. This is a shot in Mexico. This is a severe drought in Mexico. Severe flooding in China, severe drought in China. Now, has anybody noticed, I should not have advanced quite there, you haven't heard me use the term global warming yet. You know why? Because when I used to do that, I always had somebody in the audience who would say, but I think global warming would be a good thing because then poor people could pay their utility bills better in the winter. And I am glad people are concerned about poor people staying warm in the winter. But the reality of it is the poor people are going to lose the hardest, and it ain't just wintertime temperatures. So I call it global climate change because the scientific consensus is that with the possible exception of hurricanes, all weather patterns are becoming crazy. That's why they call it global weirding. They call it climate chaos. And there's a consensus that probably hurricanes is going to become linked to it, but I don't want to overreach. I don't need to. Now, this is meant to be a little bit facetious, but our addiction to cheap fossil fuels, I argue, has caused us to take some pretty risky behaviors. This is how much gasoline we use compared to all of these countries: China, Japan, Canada, Mexico, Russia, Germany, on up. Add them all up and we use more gasoline than they do every day. There's something wrong there.